Hey guys, so today I'd just like to explore with you this process or the process of unbecoming. And in naturopathic terms or naturopathic understanding, that would be the process of cure. So the law of cure, the process of going from a state of dis-ease into a state of health. And I very much understand that to be a process of unbecoming, because from the naturopathic standpoint and from my own personal point of view as well, every person possesses within them an innate ability to experience a state of health, and every person's body is wired and programmed to seek out this state of health once the obstacles to cure have been removed, and sometimes that vital force needs to be stimulated as well. So in its natural state, so without the hindrance of diet and lifestyle and different other things that we do to ourselves, environment and toxins and things like that, without that influence, the body will very naturally navigate towards existing in a state of health, which is built in to the body. It's programmed into the body. So when we talk about the law of cure, or the process of moving from a state of dis-ease to a state of health, I very much see that as a process of unbecoming the things which are not actually you in a state of health, unbecoming the dysfunction so that you can very naturally move into a state of health. It's not about forcing yourself to become anything that you are not. It's about unbecoming the things that you are not, so that you can exist in the state that it is very naturally intended for you to exist in when you allow yourself to just very naturally move back into a state of homeostasis. So in naturopathy, we talk about the law of cure, and in fact, I think it's Herring's law of cure that we refer to a lot. And in Herring's law of cure, what is understood is that this process of, again, moving from a state of dis-ease to a state of health occurs in a kind of pattern and in a rhythm. And I want to go through all of that with you guys, but something that I really want to focus on is the final law of cure, which is the understanding that as we move from a state of dis-ease to a state of health, we go through a process of a reversal of symptoms. And we'll get there, we'll end up there, and we'll explore that a bit more and unpack that and I guess discuss the relevance of that on a physical level, but on that multidimensional level as well. So the first law of cure that I'd like to talk about is this understanding that as a client is going through a process of healing, and the way that a naturopath approaches a person who is attempting to go through a process of healing, is that healing can and should occur from the head down. And this is quite multidimensional. This is not just a physical way of looking at the person and going, oh, we need to fix your head or fix your dandruff and then fix your nose and then fix your mouth and then move down through the body in that way. What this principle suggests is that in order for a person to heal on all levels, so all the healing that happens in the body on that physical level, first, the mental state of that individual needs to be addressed. So what that means is that a correct mindset needs to be adopted, and it's the naturopath's responsibility to work with the client to help them to approach health in a healthy way and to be realistic about what's going on and to get into that kind of positive healing mindset so that they can then go through this process of healing, because people's ability to heal is very much influenced, it's directed, and it's restricted by what that person believes is possible. And some people have unrealistic ideas about what is possible, or unrealistic ideas about the time frame of what is possible and when things should occur. And some people just have no belief at all. They've been experiencing a state of dis-ease for such a prolonged period of time that they believe that they can't do it, that there's something wrong with their body, that they're not able to achieve, that other people are better than them, or that they're never going to be healthy, or that they're not worthy of being healthy and they don't deserve to be healthy. They might have a mindset where they don't want to change their lifestyle habits, they don't want to change what they're doing, and it's the naturopath's responsibility to approach this and to address this, because this is absolutely fundamental and foundational to physical changes being able to happen. This is the first roadblock and the first limitation and the first place that we need to be offering healing and offering opportunity and expanding, so that that person can get ready to go through their process of healing. And sometimes it takes a lot of strength as well, and that person needs to be mentally prepared and mentally strong enough to go through this process of healing, because it can be confronting and there can be a lot that can be asked of a person if they're really willing to go through that healing process. And really setting that ground, setting that mental foundation is so important. But on that level as well, we're looking at things like depression and anxiety and trauma and terror, and sometimes some external help may be needed to approach these things. But these mental states of health are also foundational in allowing a person to go through a healing process, because the mind and these mental states and even the emotional state is very much linked in with the nervous system, and the nervous system runs through our entire body and is responsible for all of the messages that are sent to and from organs and all of the processes that are happening in our body. The nervous system is integral in that, is integrated into every aspect and every part of everything that's occurring in our physical body. So the nervous system health, addressing the nervous system as part of approaching from the mind down, is a really important part of a naturopath taking a person appropriately through this healing process. And what is suggested as well is that any healing that we attempt to do on the physical level before we address the mind or the mental state is not necessarily going to take hold in the way that it potentially could. So just addressing a person from that very three-dimensional, you have a rash on your finger, so we will address your finger and the rash that we see on your finger, instead of viewing the whole person and taking a step back and really creating that foundational grounds for healing to occur, means that we're going to miss out on a lot. And we're not necessarily addressing the cause of dis-ease as well. So that thing of from the mind down is vital, is very important, and there's a lot in that. And a lot of healing happens for people when you sometimes just by addressing that mind, addressing that mental state, addressing the nervous system, and helping them to shift into a more healthy way of viewing themselves and viewing life and interacting with life and viewing and exploring and understanding their physical body. Sometimes that in itself is enough to get a person over the line and to get them motivated to go through the process of healing. Foundational, really essential, really important. And then we move on to the next law of cure, which is the understanding that as the healing process begins to occur, so as we've kind of introduced some herbs and some lifestyle and some diet and we've tweaked a few things, and we start kind of triggering that person into a state of healing, what we often see is that, and this is just the way that healing occurs in the physical body, is that the more vital organs, so the organs that are most important to the function of the physical body, will begin to go through their healing process first. And that's very understandable, because that's just, okay, how do we, the body chooses, how do we improve our ability to have vital force and vitality, life force move through us? And by addressing those key organs, so like the liver, the heart, the gut, sexual organs, the brain, those vital organs, we address those first. And very naturally this will happen even if you just trigger that process of healing. It'll be those vital organs that will begin to go through the healing process first. And sometimes what we see happen is that, and this is the law itself, is that the healing process occurs from the most vital organs to the least vital organs. So we'll see healing happen on that foundational, fundamental level. And then it will begin to kind of trickle out and trickle through to the least vital organs. So just to give you an idea of this, if a person has a rash on their skin, but they're also having digestive issues and there's some liver dysfunction, often what will happen when we're working with this person is first the liver is going to go through a process of healing, because for everything else in the body to be functioning optimally, that liver needs to be working optimally. It needs to be functioning at its best, because those elimination pathways are vital, and the liver is vital in digestion, and the liver has a role in how many toxins are moving out through the skin instead of being excreted out through the digestive system and through the stool. So the liver will go through its healing process first. And then what you'll probably see is that the digestive system will begin to go through its healing process. And the skin, so the rash on the skin, will be probably the final thing that will be addressed, because the skin is not as vital, or the rash on the skin is not as horrific and as hindering to the life force and vitality of that person as the function of the liver is. So that's this process of healing from the most important organ to the least important organ. And then the next principle that I'd like to explore with you guys is this understanding that healing occurs, so first it occurs from the head down, from the most important organ to the least important organ. And then there's also this understanding that healing occurs from the inside to the outside. And again, this very simply makes sense. When there's a state of dis-ease being experienced within the physical body, and as we begin to disrupt and bring healing to that organ or that part of the body that is experiencing the state of dis-ease, the cause, so whatever it is within the body that is causing that state of dis-ease, needs to be eliminated. So from the inside out, that toxin or that chemical or that dysfunction or whatever it is that's causing that dis-ease needs to leave the body. So it goes from being inside the body to outside the body. And for that to happen, it needs to be able to be eliminated through our elimination pathways. And we refer to this in naturopathy as a healing crisis. And it's very common that clients will go through this healing crisis because we address what is wrong, but then what is wrong, you can't just address it and then it stays in the body. It needs to be eliminated. It needs to be excreted. It needs to leave the body. And often when this is happening for people, because our elimination pathways, our skin, our kidneys, our stool, any way that it can get out, the ears, the sinuses, through the mouth, through the saliva, and often people, when they are working with naturopaths and approaching health in this way, for a little while they might feel, oh, this is good, this is feeling better, because that area of the disease is being addressed. But then often the person, the individual, needs to go through this process of elimination. And often there can be excessive sweating, there might be movement from the sinuses, so snot, or excessive urination, or disturbances in the stool. And all of this stuff needs to be understood as a very natural and appropriate and even a welcomed part of the healing process. Pimples and rashes and things like that, which are a demonstration to the naturopath that dis-ease, that dysfunction, that thing that is not working within the body is being disrupted and is beginning to be eliminated and to leave the body. Obviously, we don't want to see these things in excess. It's not about being bedridden and vomiting all the time. But a little bit of this is a good sign and an indication that healing is occurring. And that's a really important thing, I feel, for people to really begin to understand and to grasp and to have a concept of. Like, fever can be a sign of healing occurring. But unfortunately, what we see a lot of in the general public, and a lot of what is, I guess, encouraged in some ways through allopathic medicine, is this understanding that those experiences of dysfunction, of discomfort, so the sweating and the fever and the rash and stool and urination and those kinds of things are a bad thing, and that they can never be a positive thing. And often when people are having these symptoms where the body's attempting to excrete and it's attempting to rid itself of toxins and rid itself of things that are dysfunctional and are causing harm within the body. So there's a virus cell in the body that is attempting to take over and replicate itself in the body, and the body develops a fever as a way of killing off that virus cell. And it's true, fever can get out of control sometimes, and the body can go too far and have an overactive immune response. But a lot of the time that fever is the body working to eliminate and to rid itself of something that is causing harm and causing disease and dysfunction in the physical body. But a lot of people experience a thing like that, and any kind of discomfort that they experience, they seek out a solution. They seek out some kind of medication or something that they can do that's going to suppress the symptom. But what happens when we do that, if your liver is attempting to excrete toxins through the skin, and then you slather your skin in antiperspirants and creams and things that stop you from excreting in that way, then those toxins stay in the body. There's no way for them to leave. There's no way for them to get out and to be excreted. And a lot of what we do, unfortunately, is about suppressing. It's about suppressing the body's natural processes of elimination and of excreting and actually getting rid of the things that are causing a state of disruption and causing a state of dis-ease. So one of the first things that I like to explain to clients is that they may go through a process like this, but that they should welcome this process. And obviously if it gets too excessive, they need to get back in contact, and we need to do something to make sure that the body isn't overreacting. But a bit of this process is very healthy and is a sign and is an indication that the body is doing what it is programmed and designed to do. It is actually going through a process of healing. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes temporarily it will look like a step backwards, or like you're dysfunctioning, or like you're degrading into a state of disease that you've experienced in the past, and we'll talk about that with the reversal of symptoms. But oftentimes the body actually just needs to be supported and encouraged to go through this process. And a lot of what we do in naturopathy is addressing and working with the elimination pathways. So we help the body, we assist the liver in excreting. We assist the skin in being able to release and get rid of, and assist the gut so that it can process and eliminate appropriately, so that the skin doesn't necessarily have to carry such a load. But we support that process. And when the sinuses are blocked, we're not looking to block them more and suppress that even more. We want to see the sinuses running. We want to get that liquid moving. We want things to be moving. We want things to be pumping. If there's a rash on the bottom of the leg, we want to get that lymphatic system pumping, so that through the bloodstream and then through the elimination pathways, those toxins that are causing the rash can be eliminated. And sometimes that's uncomfortable. But that temporary discomfort is the process of the dis-ease moving from within the body to the outside of the body and being excreted from the body. And this is a process that should be supported. And then the final law of cure is the understanding of a reversal of symptoms. And this is very much what I talk about when I talk about unbecoming. So the reversal of symptoms explains that when you've experienced a state of disease for a certain period of time, you can go through stages with that disease. So just a very simple example. When you were a kid, you may have had allergies, and those allergies may have progressed into having asthma. And then having asthma may have progressed into you having a rash on your skin, or gut dysfunction and then a rash on your skin, just so we can add another step in there. And as a naturopath begins to work with a client, so it seems to the client that what we're doing is we're just addressing that rash on the skin. And while we may see that the rash on the skin begins to decrease, as that happens, they may progress through this reversal of symptoms. So they may progress back into experiencing the dysfunction in the gut. And then that may pass, and as that passes, they may experience the asthma that they had as a kid. That hasn't been an issue for them since they were a kid. But that's just a process of healing occurring. And then once they've progressed through that asthma, they may have the allergies that they had when they were a really, really young kid. But we just keep going at that point, and eventually we'll take that person through that cycle of the reversal of symptoms. So basically what happens there, and what happens for us on a physical level, but I also want to suggest happens for us on an emotional, mental, spiritual and psychological level, is that when we experience a state of dis-ease, so if there's something in the body that is malfunctioning, but it's only something small, it's a small malfunction, and then something bigger, something more extreme in the body begins to malfunction, then what the body does is it prioritizes healing and putting its energy into the thing that is the greatest threat to its state of homeostasis. So it's not going to focus on a bleeding, broken fingernail when the liver is malfunctioning and there's something going on there. What the body's going to do is it might start with the fingernail and the bleeding in the finger, but if something seriously goes wrong over here in the liver, then the body's going to go, whoop, we need our resources here. And it's going to put its attention and its focus on healing where it's most vital, and where more of that vital force and that life force is being lost and degraded. And that just makes sense. Intelligent systems, intelligent immune systems, what is the greatest threat? We will address that now, regardless of what else is going on. If you're bleeding out from one of your main arteries and you're about to lose your life, then the body's going to focus on clotting and making sure that that is taken care of before it takes care of the liver, which was before the most important thing. Now we've got to stop that bleeding because that is most urgent, that is most important, that is the most immediate threat to our life, and the focus is going to go there. But when this happens over a period of time, so for some people, they've been doing this over their entire life. This was a problem, but this is a bigger problem, so we'll ignore that and we'll go to this one. Oh, now this is a bigger problem, so we'll go to that and we'll ignore this one, because they haven't actually been properly addressing and directly addressing the issues as they arise. So the immune system may not be strong enough to deal with what's going on, so it takes longer than usual, which means that this other problem pops up and it's like, oh man, we're not done with this because we didn't have the strength and the vitality and we didn't address this directly. So this isn't actually sorted, but this is more of a threat, so we're going to have to move over here and deal with that later. And it's this deal with it later kind of approach. I'll deal with it later, I can't handle it now, I'll deal with it later, I'll deal with it later, I'll deal with it later. So that we're just focusing on the most prominent and the most important thing. And what we see often for people who are experiencing chronic disease, so they're in a state of chronic disease, as we address that thing that is the most important and the most vital and the most pressing, which we will always do as naturopaths, we're always going to address the thing that is the greatest threat to that person, or the greatest discomfort, or the greatest pain, the biggest threat. We address that. And often as we do that, what happens is the immune system doesn't have, or the body's homeostasis producing processes don't have to focus so intensely and so extremely on that one thing that is the big threat. And often what will happen for people is all of these other things begin to appear and they begin to pop up as part of their health experience. And it was like, what? But I didn't have gut issues before, or I didn't have headaches before, or I didn't have a skin rash before. And what's happening is that these aren't new symptoms. These are things that the body couldn't deal with at the time. And because the body is under less stress and is having to focus less on this big issue, more of the body's resources are being made available to deal with the more minor issues. And what happens then as the focus shifts to the more minor issues, which is a good sign, it's a sign of healing. It means that that major threat is being addressed and is no longer as big a threat as it was before. Then the system begins to focus on the smaller things. So it's like, oh, I'm feeling this thing that I couldn't feel before. Am I getting worse? Are you making me worse? Am I regressing into another state of disease? Are you replacing my high cholesterol with gut dysfunction? What's going on here? But what's actually happening is that the awareness of the body's healing systems is shifting. There are more resources being made available. So now, where we didn't have the space to deal with something that was bleeding on the inside, we just had to clot it up and say we'll deal with it later. Now you've got the resources available to go through actually healing that thing, which means you're probably going to feel that thing again. And again, this is a good sign. This is a sign that more of your immune system's resources and all of your bodily resources are being made available to deal with more minor issues. And we do the same thing. If we're in a state of crisis, so we've got a pain in our leg and we're really focused on that pain in our leg, but then we begin to have a migraine and it's like, oh man, that's all I can think about, that's all I can feel. We become less aware of the pain that's occurring in our leg. And we're having this migraine, but while we're having this migraine, we're in a horrific car crash. And there's this emergency, there's this crisis that happens. We're not thinking about our leg, we're not thinking about our migraine. We're immediately, intensely focused on this car crash, on this big thing that's occurring and making sure that we're safe and that others are safe and that we're healing whatever needs to be healed as the result of this car crash, so whatever is life-threatening. We address that first, of course we do. Of course we do. That's just what we do as humans. We address the thing that is presents as most of a threat and the biggest crisis, and we forget about the things that aren't a big deal and aren't as big a crisis at that time. But then once we've dealt with that, and we've gotten over the shock of that, then it's like, oh man, my migraine's come back. But the migraine hasn't come back. It was always there. It's just that your system, in its state of stress, heightened response, and our bodies do this. Cortisol, amazing thing. Suppressed the migraine and the symptoms of the migraine so that you could have all of your resources available to deal with the crisis that was at hand. So migraine didn't go away. It just slipped into the background because it was nowhere near as important as what was going on. So you become aware of the migraine and then you lay down, you drink lots of water, you take your herbs, and the migraine begins to settle. And then it's like, oh man, my knee, what is that? What is that all about? We thought we dealt with that days ago. You didn't actually deal with that days ago. Again, it was just the body's response. We can't deal with that right now because we got this migraine happening. So we suppress that, slip it into the background, focus on the migraine. But as you heal the migraine, then the knee pain becomes more apparent. And we do this all the time. I often get clients that as we begin to heal the bigger thing, they go, man, I've noticed that my ovaries are hurting. And I have a feeling that they've always been hurting. I just haven't been aware of it because they've been in so much pain with something else. and they become aware of things that were happening in the background. And as they become aware of those things, it's like, okay, we can address that. That's the next thing. That's the reversal of symptoms. That's us taking you back to experiencing a state of health. Because that state of health is in there. It's just got all these things piled on top of it. And I want to suggest here that we do this as well on an emotional, mental, psychological, energetic level as well. If we're feeling really sad because our friend doesn't want to be friends with us anymore one day, but then, and we don't finish dealing with that, we're devastated and we're sad, but then something else happens which causes us to become really anxious, then all of a sudden we forget about that. We forget about what happened with our friend because we're in this heightened state of anxiety and we have to deal with this. And then in that heightened state of anxiety, one of your family members passes away. And it's like, oh my God, I have to focus on that. And then you're dealing with grief and maybe depression and loss and all these deep feelings that just are more important and more immediately threatening to you on that emotional level than the anxiety. So then you're dealing with that. And then I don't know what can happen that could be worse than a family member dying, but then something else happens. You experience a trauma. And then it's like, oh man, I have to put this grief and this depression aside because I have to deal with this trauma and this thing that's really immediately emotionally threatening to me. And so you deal with that. And once you've dealt with that, then maybe you'll regress back into the grief and the depression. And once you've moved through that, you'll regress into the anxiety. And once you move through the anxiety, there's the root thing, there's that root cause of that kind of chain reaction, which is the loss and the feeling of rejection because your friend doesn't want to be friends with you anymore. And we do this as children a lot as well. When something traumatic happens and we don't have the resources and the ability and the emotional intelligence and the mental capacity to deal with what is happening to us or that something that we're involved in, then we just go, I'll deal with it later. And then we focus on the next thing. And then, oh, I can't deal with that. We'll focus on it later. And then we move on. And for a lot of people, they reach well into adulthood and they're still experiencing the tip of that chain reaction of suppression. And often what happens is, as you begin to work with them to kind of approach and to feel into and to let themselves heal what is immediately going on for them, it's like, oh, there's something else going on underneath that. Oh, there's something else going on underneath that. And eventually they're able to link it back and move through to the trauma that they experienced as a child. And that's just this process of healing occurring. And this is also something that I guess I feel needs to become more widely accepted as part of the healing process. When you start healing one thing, it's going to unlock this chest of other things that have been suppressed and not appropriately dealt with. And those things are going to come to the surface, they're going to surface and they're going to present themselves to you. And that is not a sign that you are degrading. That is not a sign that the healing isn't happening. That is not a sign that it's hopeless or that you're never going to be okay or you're never going to get through that. That is a sign that you are successfully dealing with your most pressing issue, and now other issues are presenting themselves and going, oh, maybe I can be healed too. Oh, maybe it's time to heal this as well. Or, oh, maybe can you help me process through this or feel this thing, or can we get some herbs for this? Can we address this? And that's a sign that the healing process is occurring and that the healing process is working. But oftentimes that healing process is multidimensional. It's never just going to be physical. There's always going to be stuff in there that's a mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic trauma that is tied in with and is part of that healing process. So as practitioners, we need to get good at being able to acknowledge that that is what's going on, and that there is this bigger picture happening, and that it's all tied together, and it's all part of the same thing. It's all part of that healing process. It's all part of that reversal of symptoms and coming back to that core possibility of homeostasis and health. And that there's nothing wrong with addressing one thing and then having another thing pop up. Again, that's part of it, and us being able to educate our clients in that so that they can accept that that is part of the process, and that that is a sign of actually healing, is going to take them a really long way, because then they can be at peace with that, and they can understand as well that they're actually healing. Anything that they've done in the past, if they've dealt with that anxiety by taking pills and numbing it, it hasn't gone away. It's been suppressed. That thing has been suppressed. That rash with the cortisol cream, it's just been suppressed. It hasn't been healed. And there's a lot of things that we're doing that are about suppression. And as long as we suppress things, they're always going to be there. And we can try to fake ourselves into a state of health while sitting on this pile, this chasm of suppressed symptoms. But we're never going to actually be experiencing a state of health. We're never actually going to be living in and moving into a state of homeostasis, because we're just sitting on top of this pile of symptoms that have been suppressed. Whether it's because we emotionally couldn't deal with it, we mentally couldn't deal with it, or we physically couldn't deal with it, so we just put a band-aid on it and pretended that it wasn't there. It's still there. But as you begin to desire to go through this healing of process, because healing always takes longer than suppression. And that's another thing, that in this quick society where we want results straight away and we want things to happen immediately, a lot of people don't understand that healing actually takes time, and a lot of people are frustrated with that and don't want to take that time to heal. But it does take time. But if you actually take the time to let yourself go through a process of healing, then you're actually going to be healed on the other side. You're actually going to be whole. You're actually going to be able to experience a state of health and homeostasis, because you've gone through that process of addressing all of those suppressed symptoms, bringing them to the surface, transmuting them, transforming them, healing them, so that you can end up at a place where it's like, oh, that's actually not an issue for me anymore. I actually don't have that as part of my fundamental makeup anymore. I'm actually just me without those things, because I've gone through the process of healing. But it's a big commitment, and not everyone is willing to make that commitment to go all the way with it, and we need to be okay with that as well. We can't force people to go through things that they're not willing to go through. We can only take them as far as they're willing to go with us. And for some people, when it hits the emotional stuff, it's too much for them, and they don't want to go there, and they don't want to do that, and that's okay. That's their choice. But every now and then you'll get someone that's going to want to go all the way with you, and they're going to want to go all the way through this process of healing, because they can sense and they can feel that they're capable of something more, that something else is possible. And we got to have the tools and the equipment and the ability to, and external resources to help people to go through that, and to not be freaked out by that, to not be scared of that as the client, to not be scared of that, but as the practitioner, to not be afraid of that either, and to be able to work together to appropriately go through this process of healing. And it's a wonderful, joyful thing, but we as practitioners need to be willing to go through that process of healing in ourselves as well. It's not just about facilitating it for someone else, because we can only take a person as far as we are willing to go. We can't help someone to achieve something that we're not willing to achieve in ourselves. So we need to be willing to explore and to unpack and to heal, to go through this process of healing on all of these levels, and go as deep and as far with it as we can go, so that we can then assist others in going through that same process, and they'll feel it. You can feel when someone's talking about something that they have personally experienced. And you can also feel when someone's just reciting something that they've read in a textbook. And they're two very different things, and most people are going to trust you more and be more willing to work with you if you can speak from your own personal experience and talk about something that you have come to know in yourself and you have come to heal in yourself. So there's a lot in that, and I encourage you to keep unpacking that and to keep feeling into that and to feel into your commitment to health, your commitment to healing, but also your expectations about healing and what healing looks like and how it should feel and how quickly you should be getting results, and I guess do some soul searching and feel into whether you are personally ready to commit to go on a healing journey like that. Ponder, explore, feel into it.